this evening's business meeting is approval of our meeting minutes from our y'all hear it? Is that better?
Much better. Yeah, speak into it, right?
Hey Dave, I make a motion to approve these minutes as written. Thank you. Did you hear me, Dave?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion for approval and a second for approval of the planning commission meetings. The minutes of the planning commission meeting from August 21st. All in favor, say aye. Aye. So ordered. Richie. We're going to wait until 6, until a little bit closer to 6 o'clock. We're going to get the public hearing on United Development of Use, or use by the sorry. I'm Dave Warwell. I'm the chairman of the Fort Thomas Planning Commission, and joining us this evening is the rest of our planning commission members. We are a volunteer board of residents of the city that help assist the city administration with administration of our planning and zoning. I want to thank all of you for coming this evening. We've been working as the planning commission and city staff on updating the planning and zoning, the planning ordinance. The zoning ordinance for the city as well as our subdivision regulations. We've been working on this process intermittently over the past couple of years. We published a draft of the new ordinance about a month ago, and it is available for review on the city website. And many of you received letters describing the changes that are occurring. And this evening, we're holding a public hearing for each of you to have the opportunity to make any comments or questions. And after my brief introduction here, we're going to have a presentation from the city planning consultants. Following that presentation, we'll open up the hearing for the comments. You're not required to make a comment, but if you do, please sign up on the sign-in sheets at each of the entrances. You will be limited to 3 minutes per person for comments. We ask that you stick to questions or comments regarding what is called the Unified Development Ordinance for the city and not approach on other subjects. Also, please do not defer your time to others. We would like each individual to speak for themselves. If somebody gets up and presents a question or a comment that is similar to what you were going to ask, we would ask you to defer in the interest of time. Also, this will be an opportunity for questions and comments. It's not going to be an interactive session between members of the commission, city staff, or the members of the audience here this evening, but we will, following the opening for comments, we will try to address questions or comments towards the end of the meeting if we have the time to do so. If we're unable to address comments or questions this evening, the city is recording this meeting and there will be a response to the questions and comments here presented. Also, after this meeting is done, if there was a question or comment that didn't get addressed, or you think of something after the fact, you can feel free to please contact Kevin Harvey and the city staff. That can be done via email on the website, or you can write a letter or stop by in person to discuss with them. The comments will be, the responses to the questions and comments will be posted on the city website, and or they'll respond to the individual directly. Anything else that we want to cover? We just ask that during the question and answer period that people maintain respect and don't interrupt other speakers. Just for everybody's information, if you haven't been to the mess hall previously, there are restrooms in the center hallway here with drinking fountains. Depending on how long the meeting goes this evening, we may or may not take an intermission and a break. And we also ask that everybody keep their cell phones on vibrate or silent And with that, I'll turn it over to Secretary Fehler to read the proof of posting for this evening's meeting. And then we will open it up for our presentation and then followed by our question and answer period.
I, Dan Fehler, Secretary for Thomas Planning Commission, hereby certify the attached is a true copy of the notice of the public hearing being held on Tuesday, October 3rd, 2024 at 6 o'clock in the Mess Hall in Tower Park, which is located at 801 Cochran Street, Fort Thomas. Legal notice was published in Lincoln, Northern Kentucky on Friday, September the 13th. I, Dan Fehler, Secretary of the Fort Thomas Planning Commission, hereby acknowledge that written notification letters were mailed to affected property owners via first class mail and postmarked August the 8th.
Excuse me, I do have a question. Is the city videoing it, or do we have Richie MacKnight Enterprises videoing it? Oh, so thank you, Richie, for videoing the meetings for us.
And with that, we will start our presentation by CP Consultants, and then following the presentation, like I mentioned before, there will be an opportunity for anyone who wants to speak or offer comments to do so. I have the sign-in sheets here. If you came in after the original collection of sign-in sheets, if you decide to change your mind while you're sitting listening to the discussion and want to ask a question, please sign in one of the sheets, and we'll call everybody in the order that they're on the sign-in sheet. Thank you.
So good evening, I am Elizabeth Rogers and with me is my students.
Can we formally open? Oh, yes. And with that, we'll formally open the public hearing for the update of the Unified Development Ordinance for the City of Fort Thomas.
Frank and I are both employed with CT Consultants, and CT was hired by the City of Fort Thomas to assist with the update to the city's zoning and subdivision regulations. I will start my presentation by reviewing the zoning and subdivision update process. I will quickly explain what the zoning and subdivision regulations actually do, give a very brief history of the city's existing ordinances, then dig into the meat of the presentation, which is a review of the draft Unified Development Ordinance, and then we will end with next steps. The zoning and subdivision ordinance update project progressed in roughly 4 phases, but we did have a brief scoping phase in late 2021. The first phase of the project began in November of 21, and this phase included an analysis of existing conditions, as well as a thorough examination of the existing zoning and subdivision ordinance. And at the end of this phase, we published a diagnostic report of the findings and recommendations, which we reviewed with the Planning Commission in January and February of 2022. This guidance report is available on the city's website. If y'all have trouble hearing me, somebody just raise a hand, okay? Phase 2, in phase 2, we started completing the revised regulations. We started that phase 2 in the spring of 2022. But the project was paused until January of 2023. In January of that year, we began almost monthly meetings with the Planning Commission in order to flesh out the major changes from your current ordinances. We also conducted coffee and conversation sessions in order to give community members an opportunity to discuss proposed ordinance changes and ask questions. We actually held 8 coffee and, is that better? Okay. We held 8 coffee and conversation sessions in 2023. All of the phase 2 drafts were compiled into a single document and placed on the city's website. That phase 2 draft tracks changes from your existing regulations. In phase 3, which we began in January of 2024 and concluded in April of this year. On January 11th, we provided a draft of all proposed changes to the city's ordinances, and the phase 2 draft is available on the city's website as well. And we are currently in phase 4, which we began in May. On May 6th, we delivered the first edition of the phase 4 draft, and that in phase 4 includes the adoption process for the revised zoning and subdivision ordinances. During this phase 4, the Planning Commission and the City Council met together several times, and the City Council also held 2 work sessions. We delivered a second edition of this phase 4 draft on August 28th that incorporates the requested changes that we heard in May through July of this year. The presentation tonight reviews the material in this August 28th edition of the proposed UDO. As the chair mentioned in his opening remarks, we are here tonight to hold a public hearing on the draft Unified Development Ordinance. This public hearing is required by the Kentucky Revised Statutes to give interested persons the opportunity to provide questions and to provide comments and to ask questions about any proposed legislation. So we talked a lot about what a Unified Development Ordinance, but what exactly is one? A UDO has both the zoning ordinance and the subdivision ordinance in one document. Today, Fort Thomas has 2 standalone ordinances, a zoning ordinance and a subdivision ordinance, and a UDO that puts most development regulations in one code for ease of use. So what exactly are subdivision and zoning ordinances? To provide some context, we will start with some background information on the zoning and subdivision ordinances. Since the bulk of tonight's presentation will be about zoning, I will start with the question, what exactly is zoning? Zoning is the rules for how land can be used and developed, and these rules are all listed in what we call the zoning text. Those rules are effectuated by dividing the city into districts, called zoning districts, which are shown on the zoning map. The zoning regulations control the use of property, how intense that use can be, and how big the building can be on that property that houses the use. Zoning districts are shown on the zoning map, which identifies where and how the regulations apply to the land. The proposed zoning map for the UDO was on the city's website, and it's also on the easels that you see sitting around tonight. Zoning is a blunt tool because of the limitations placed by the state and federal government, but also because we can only fine-tune the standards so much. We can generally regulate land use. So for example, we can say a retail use is permitted, but we can't say which particular retail use is allowed on the lot. We can regulate lot characteristics like lot width and lot size. We can dictate where a building may go on land on a lot using regulations that dictate how far a building must be from the lot line. And when you refer to that, that is called a setback. It is the interplay of all of these regulations that design a site and establish the character of a place or a zoning district. The city's existing zoning ordinance was adopted in 2012 and has been amended many times since adoption, and those amendments have been both to the zoning map as well as to the zoning text. The base of the existing zoning ordinance is a model ordinance that was adopted by many northern Kentucky communities. We have retained large portions of the existing ordinance, but we have tried to tailor some of the development standards or regulations to the existing lots and the existing built environment that we have here in Fort Thomas, which really did not occur when the ordinance was adopted back in 2012. Unlike zoning, which primarily controls the use of land, the subdivision regulations primarily control the subdivision or the dividing of parcels and the construction of public improvements on those parcels and in subdivisions such as sidewalks. Subdivision regulations are process or procedures oriented, and they are very highly technical. And they contain engineering standards and drawings for constructing public improvements like sidewalks and sewers and those sorts of things. Fort Thomas's subdivision regulations were adopted in 1990 with no major updates since adoption. In addition to some of the issues that I previously mentioned, like needing to tailor the regulations to your existing built environment, the city's zoning regulations needed to be updated to align them with the laws enacted by both the federal government as well as the Commonwealth of Kentucky. In addition, there are court cases, especially federal cases, that necessitated changes to the existing zoning ordinance. Because Fort Thomas and subdivision regulations have not been updated for many years, and engineering standards have changed since 1990, many of the revisions to the subdivision regulations really consist of these needed engineering modifications. The UDO is organized into articles in which we generally group all like things or all like regulations into the same article. Article 1 includes all of the sections that deal with the administration of the UDO. And then Article 3 is the zoning district, and I'll spend most of the time in the presentation on this article on those zoning districts. Article 5 includes all the regulations that apply across the zoning districts for things like parking and signs. And then Article 7 is the subdivision regulations. We're going to start with Article 1, which I have said is the article that deals with the administration of the UDO. All of the sections of Article 1 are shown on the screen. Article 1 clearly defines and outlines all the procedures related to the processing of proposed development applications, whether it's the procedure used by the Planning Commission for development applications or the procedures used by the Board of Adjustment to consider variations to regulations in the Unified Development Ordinance. Article 3 includes all of the individual zoning districts with the regulations that are specific to each zoning district.
I'm sorry, can you please keep talking into the microphone? Every time you turn your head, we lose it.
So Article 3 includes all of the individual zoning districts. We're going to try this again. So Article 3 includes all of the individual zoning districts with the regulations that are specific to each zoning district. Even though some uses or regulations may be changed through this update to the zoning regulations, these revisions do not require a property owner to make changes to their property. Land uses that exist today before the zoning regulations are updated may remain. Any buildings that don't comply with the revised regulations don't have to be modified. The proposed changes in the UDO only come into play if someone wishes to make changes to their property at some point in time in the future. It sounds like that may have helped, did it?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, thank you for letting me know. On the screen, there are residential zoning districts, which will start with the prefix R1. All of the existing residential districts are retained, meaning we didn't get rid of any of that. There is one additional single-family residential district, which is the R1 Town Center District, that I will explain in more depth shortly. A single-family residential district is the zoning for most of the neighborhoods in Fort Thomas. In the proposed UDO, there are 5 mixed-use and business districts. The districts and the sub-zoning districts that you see highlighted in yellow on the screen are new in the Unified Development District. There are 2 other districts, which are the River Preservation District that runs along Maryland Highway and the Conservation District. Both of these districts are existing and are being retained in the proposed Unified Development Ordinance. The traditional business district, which is the zoning district that will be used for Inverness, the Alexander Pike mixed-use district, and the neighborhood commercial office district are new and replace the existing zoning districts, including the general commercial, the highway commercial, and the industrial park districts. There are also 4 special districts being proposed in the UDO, which are all overlay districts. The residential cluster residential overlay district is existing. All of the other districts are new. These include the Fort Thomas Avenue Overlay District, the Central Business District Historic Overlay District, as well as the Tower Park Historic Overlay District. We will explain more about the overlay districts further on in the presentation. Just so that you know, overlay districts are a special type of zoning district established to provide for specific additional requirements and are applied on top of the regulations for the applicable zoning district, as you see with the graphic on the screen. We will start with the single-family districts, and single-family districts are those areas of the city where most of the homes are located. The zoning map shows where the zoning districts are applied to the parcels in Fort Thomas. The portions of the map that you see on the screen that are in shades of green or greenish blue are the city's existing residential districts. Most of the neighborhoods are zoned R1B or R1C, and those are on the R1B, and the R1B is in lime green, and the R1C is in that bluish green color that you see on the map. As I mentioned in the background section, the existing single-family districts were really not tailored to the existing built environment in Fort Thomas, largely due to the usage of that model code. Consequently, their current development standards, which are regulations like setbacks, really don't reflect where homes are actually located on lots within the city. Therefore, homeowners have to request variances, which are special permissions from the city, if they want to add on to their homes. After reviewing past variances, we propose development standards that are more in keeping with your existing housing stock and your existing lots. The UDO includes reductions to the minimum side and rear setbacks in 2 R1 districts, as you see on the screen. This change may assist some homeowners who wish to invest in the properties, since fewer of them will need variances. However, these changes will not completely eliminate the need for variances. Today, we have some homes that are sitting right on the lot line or just a few feet from the side lot line, and these people are still going to need to request a variance from the Board of Adjustment. And again, a variance is permission for the Board of Adjustment to deviate from the zoning regulations. We did create one new single-family district, which is the R1 Town Center District, with 2 sub-zoning districts. A sub-zoning district is a subcategory within a zoning district that serves to refine the uses and the standards within that zoning district. This new zoning district includes development standards that recognize the unique characteristics of the lots that are located between Hagedorn Lane, Lumley Avenue, Miller Lane, and North Shaw Lane. The lot sizes and the lot widths vary for these parcels, and the regulations for the R1C TC1 and the R1 TC2 sub-zoning districts address these varying lot sizes as well as the varying characteristics for these lots. The current zoning ordinance and the proposed UDO require a minimum front setback in the residential districts, which is basically how far a home has to be from the front lot line. When a minimum front setback is established for a zoning district, a building must be located at or anywhere behind that minimum front setback. To better control the placements of homes, the UDO does mandate a maximum front setback in the R1B and the R1C districts, and this is a change from your existing zoning ordinance. This change will prevent homes from being located too far back on the lot. The maximum front setback only applies in these zoning districts because they are the most compact single-family districts that you have in the city, and therefore a home out of line would be the most noticeable. And you can see on the screen what it means to actually have a maximum front setback. The homes have to be located behind the maximum, but in front of, behind the minimum, but in front of the maximum front setback. So we will leave the residential zoning districts and move to business districts, starting with the Alexandria Pike mixed-use district. Today, there are 3 separate non-residential nodes along Alexandria Pike. Starting at the southern end, there's the area at Hollywood that stretches to Pleasant Avenue. These parcels are currently zoned either professional office, which is shown as PO on the existing zoning map, which you see on the screen, or general commercial, which is abbreviated GC on the existing zoning map. Further north, there's another cluster of non-residential uses that exists from Bluefield Avenue to Blossom Lane, and all of these parcels are currently zoned professional office. The third area starts just beyond the Northern Kentucky Water District property and stretches to I-471 and includes parcels that are currently zoned industrial park, general commercial, and highway commercial. These four existing zoning districts are currently being replaced along Alexander Pike with a district called the Alexander Pike Mixed Use District, which has two sub-zoning districts. The Alexander Pike Mixed Use 1, which is shown in blue on the map, and the Alexander Mixed Use 2, which is shown in yellow on the screen. The sub-zoning district differs by development standards, but the permitted uses are the same in most sub-zoning districts. This district is a place-based district that is only applicable along Alexander Pike. In the four existing zoning districts that I just mentioned, the maximum permitted height along Alexander Pike ranges from 40 feet to 50 feet, with most of the area currently having a maximum permitted building height of 50 feet, because the area is mostly zoned either commercial office or professional, a general commercial or professional office. Under the UDO, the maximum permitted building height along Alexander Pike is being reduced from 50 feet to 40 feet. The Alexander Pike Mixed Use District permits typical office and retail uses. However, multifamily units over non-residential uses like offices and retail uses will no longer be permitted under the UDO. Today, in the professional office and the general commercial districts, multifamily dwelling units on the top of offices and retail uses are permitted, but that will not be permitted under the UDO. We are moving on to the neighborhood commercial office district. This commercial mixed-use district is not place-based, meaning it is use-based and will be used in multiple locations throughout the city. The neighborhood commercial office district is currently being considered for Fort Thomas Plaza, which is currently zoned general commercial, and the commercial office uses at Highland and Grand, which are currently zoned either general commercial or professional office. Like the Alexander Pike Mixed Use District, typical office and retail uses are permitted by right, as is the residential uses over non-residential uses if the dwelling units exist at the time the UDO is adopted by the City Council. Today, in all areas zoned for professional office or general commercial, multifamily dwelling units on top of offices and retail uses are permitted. In the case of the neighborhood commercial office district, they are only going to be permitted if they exist at the time the UDO is adopted. The professional office district is being retained with some revisions. The intent of the professional office district is to provide locations for predominantly office uses. It will be used at 600 South Fort Thomas Avenue, which is shown on the screen. It will also be utilized at 1960 Memorial Parkway, which is where Bella Dance is today. It will be used at 2000 Memorial Parkway, which is where the veterinary clinic is today as well. The uses permitted by right will be typical office uses, including medical and dental offices. The maximum height of the principal buildings in the professional office district will be 40 feet, which is being reduced from the current maximum permitted height, which is today in the professional office district, 6 stories not to exceed 50 feet. Your current ordinance also permits the planning commission to waive both the maximum stories and the maximum permitted height in the professional office district, and that will not be permitted in the UDO. Under the proposed UDO, Inverness will be zoned traditional business district, and today it is zoned general commercial. The traditional business district is shown on the map on the screen in sky blue. Unlike the general commercial zoning which currently exists today, the traditional business district has defined development standards that reinforce the existing built environment in Inverness and provide appropriate development standards if lots are redeveloped, such as the gas station. In addition, the proposed development standards for the traditional business district regulate building size using a maximum building width and a maximum building depth. In addition, the maximum permitted height in the UDO's area is being reduced under the UDO from 50 feet, which is permitted again in the general commercial district today, and will only be permitted to have a maximum height of 40 feet in the UDO. Typical retail office uses will be permitted, as well as residential dwellings over non-residential uses, provided the size of the building is 5,500 square feet or less. Buildings larger than 5,500 square feet that contain both dwelling units and non-residential uses will be a conditional use in the traditional building district, traditional business district. The building in this photo would be classified as a conditional use due to its size, which means that the Board of Adjustment must review any new development in Inverness that is over 5,500 square feet and place appropriate conditions if they are necessary. Classifying larger uses as a conditional use is a new concept for the city, but it does give the city an opportunity to control larger control over larger developments. From the traditional business district, we will move on to the central business district. Under the current zoning ordinance, the downtown and town center area and Midway are all zoned central business district, which is abbreviated CBD, which you'll hear that abbreviation a lot in this presentation. The current CBD really is a one-size-fits-all district that applies equally to all parcels that are zoned central business district, whether they are located in the middle of downtown or Midway, or situated along the fringes along Garrison or Shawnee. For the ease of this presentation, I have split the discussion of the central business district and will start with downtown or town center. Like the Alexander Pike mixed-use district, we are using subzoning districts to differentiate the different areas in town center. In the case of town center, the subzoning districts are used to differentiate both uses and development standards, so the development regulations are different by subzoning district. Town center has 3 subzoning districts: the core, the suburban, and the residential. The boundaries for the central business district for downtown are, for the most part, unchanged under the proposed UDO. The peak is the town center core, which is the traditional commercial center of downtown. The light orange is the supporting subzoning district, which includes the city building and the Masonic Lodge, just to give you some points of reference on the map. The dusty blue is a residential subzoning district for all the homes located on Miller and Lumley and Ottawa Place. Finally, you will see the brown hash marks, and those hash marks show the proposed district for the central business district, which I'll discuss later in the presentation. Today, under the current zoning ordinance, there are minimal development standards in the central business district. The standards set are minimum lot area and minimum lot width and maximum height. Today, the maximum height in the central business district is either 4 stories or 50 feet.
Is there anything that's actually that tall? No, well, besides the monstrosity.
There'll be a time for that.
Okay, I just didn't want to aggravate that.
So the setback standards that are currently in the central business district are allowed to the discretion of the planning commission as it's currently drafted and currently written in the existing ordinance. One of the major topics of conversation throughout the zoning ordinance update is the maximum permitted height in downtown. In the UDO, the maximum permitted height is being reduced to 40 feet, with a limitation on the number of stories also being proposed. Flat roof buildings are limited to 2 stories, and slope roof buildings are limited to 2.5 stories. The central business district includes principal building siding standards that mandate both a minimum and a maximum setback from Fort Thomas Avenue, and dictate setbacks to the sites adjacent to R1 districts, for example. Like in furnace, there are standards for maximum building width and building depth. In order to further regulate larger developments containing residential dwelling units, buildings over 5,500 square feet are classified as conditional uses like an furnace. I'll move on in terms and talk about Central Business District as it relates to Midway. There are 5 subzoning districts in Midway, 3 core districts and 2 residential ones. The core subzoning districts differ in permitted uses and development standards, and residential subzoning districts differentiate also by permitted uses, with the more intense non-residential uses being permitted and the residential 1 subzoning district. As in downtown, the boundaries for the Central Business District are basically unchanged. There is one parcel being added that I'll mention in a minute. The core 1 is the aqua color. This is the area of Midway where the older 3-story historic buildings are located. The rust color is the core 2 subzoning district and includes the area of Midway south of Best Furniture and along River Road. The core 3 is the Cincinnati Bell building, and it is olive green on the map. Currently, the Cincinnati Bell building is zoned R3, but the proposed UDO would actually bring it into the Central Business District as a part of the Central Business District from Midway. The fluorescent green that you see on the screen are the residential 2 subzoning districts, and these are the residential parcels along side streets that intersect with Fort Thomas Avenue, and today these parcels are zoned Central Business District. The lilac parcels are the residential 1 subzoning district and includes most of the Midway Court and the shop houses on South Fort Thomas Avenue. As with downtown, the maximum permitted height is being reduced with one exception that I will address on the next slide. Today, the maximum permitted height throughout all of Midway, where we zone CBD, is 50 feet or 4 stories. After extended discussions between the City Council and the Planning Commission, it was felt that it would be appropriate to have some increased height in Midway due to the existing historic buildings that are there. The orange line that you show on the screen depicts the location in Midway where this increased height is being permitted under the UDO. In this location, the maximum permitted height is 45 feet and 3 stories is permitted. The blue stars on the map indicate where the taller buildings exist today. As I indicated on the previous slide, the remainder of the core subzoning districts in Midway are limited to 40 feet in height, with 2 stories for flat roofs and 2.5 stories for slate roofs. Like in downtown, in order to further regulate large developments containing residential dwelling units, buildings over 5,500 square feet are classified as conditional uses. We are leaving the standard subzoning districts and we're going to be discussing the historic overlay districts. There are 2 historic overlay districts being proposed. One is incorporating the existing Central Business District, local historic district, and one is new and includes the residential parcels in Tower Park. The CBD Local Historic District was created in 2002 in Chapter 36 of the Code of Ordinances. Because of the way Chapter 36 is written, everything zoned Central Business District is in the Local Historic District. In the UDO, we are simply mapping this existing Local Historic District. We will be incorporating the Cincinnati Bell building into the Local Historic District because we are zoning in Central Business District. No other significant changes are being proposed. Properties will continue to be reviewed by the Design Review Board, who is charged with issuing certificates of appropriateness if proposed alterations are visible from public rights of way, and these proposed alterations must conform to the official CBD design guidelines as they are referred to in Chapter 36 of the Code of Ordinances. The Tower Park Historic Overlay District is new. There are 3 historic areas within Tower Park. The proposed Tower Park Historic Overlay District creates a local historic district for just the historic houses in Tower Park. This overlay district regulates the exterior alterations if those alterations are visible from public or private rights of way or from public property. The design review board will review these proposed exterior changes. Today, exterior alterations to historic homes are regulated, but they are reviewed and regulated differently based upon the location of the historic home in Tower Park. The next overlay district is the Fort Thomas Avenue overlay district, and it is not a historic district. The Fort Thomas Avenue overlay district is a zoning overlay district dedicated to protection of the traditional development patterns and neighborhood character along Fort Thomas Avenue. The regulations promote and protect the character of the existing built environment for the existing single-family and two-family dwellings along Fort Thomas Avenue. This proposed zoning overlay district overlays parcels that are currently zoned R1A, R1B, and R1C, and R3 properties, as you will see on the map in just a moment. If uses on the parcels are single-family detached dwellings, two-family dwellings, or residential care facilities. The boundaries for the overlay district are shown on the zoning map with a blue hash mark. The Fort Thomas Avenue overlay district starts on the northern end of the city at Covert Run and goes down to Waterworks Road. Then the district proceeds from Waterworks Road down to downtown. Because this overlay district only applies to residential properties, the Fort Thomas Avenue overlay district skips downtown and resumes at St. Nicholas Place all the way down to the Midway area. From Midway, the overlay district ends at Alexandria Pike. Although some modifications to residential properties will be subject to these regulations, it's all new construction and substantial additions. In this case, substantial additions means any alteration or modification to the facade of a residential property along facing Fort Thomas Avenue, other than routine maintenance. The overlay district regulations include a tight regulation of the front setback of the principal dwelling, the placement of detached and attached garages, the placement of carports, roof design, building orientation, a prohibition against enclosing front porches. The facade design must include sub-transparent materials such as typical windows and the placement of solar panels. The final article I will mention is Article 5, which includes the sections dealing with the regulations applicable to all districts. This article includes a diverse set of regulations that apply across all zoning districts. Much of the existing regulations are included in this article. There are two sections that I will highlight. The first is section 5.4, which includes the conditional use and restricted use regulations. This is a new section. It includes individualized standards for every conditional or restricted use listed in the use tables in each zoning district, which will assist the board of adjustment when they consider conditional uses. Also, this new section places all specific use regulations in one section in the code instead of being distributed throughout the ordinance, which is the case under the current zoning ordinance. The second section I will mention is the sign regulations. The sign regulations have been changed considerably to align with Reed versus the town of Gilbert. This U.S. Supreme Court case requires sign regulations to be content neutral, and regulations based on sign message, either explicitly or implicitly, are no longer permitted. And the proposed UDO, electronic message senders are prohibited in the city's residential districts. Currently, electronic message senders, also known as digital signs, are permitted for public and parochial schools located in residential zoning districts. Any existing electronic message senders may be retained and maintained. In terms of next steps, the Planning Commission public hearing is tonight, obviously, and the Planning Commission expects to make a recommendation to the City Council at their meeting on October 16th. Tentative dates for City Council consideration include November 18th and December 16th. Again, these dates are tentative and subject to change. For any questions that we don't answer tonight, please use the contact information on the screen. We will also display this information again at our meeting. And I will now turn it back to the Chair of the Planning Commission.
Thank you, and we're going to open up the public comment period of the public hearing. As I mentioned previously, we're going to call each individual by the order that they're on the sign-in sheet. If you happen to come in after the beginning of the meeting and you wish to speak or ask a question, please sign in the sign-in sheet at the table at the back of the room. And again, for the interest of time, we're limiting comments to 3 minutes per person. And please, if you have, if somebody else has essentially the same question, we ask you to defer your comments or questions if somebody else has the similar question. And with that, we'll get started this evening. There is no real time limit on the meeting this evening. As I mentioned earlier, we may take an intermission, depending on how late things go. And if you didn't have an opportunity to ask a question or present a comment at the meeting tonight, you can still do that after the meeting, contacting the city staff, Kevin Martin, sitting over here to my left, and you can email, call, or write your stuff on the city, and the city will respond to those comments. With that, our first speaker is Elizabeth Allergan, I think it is.
I'm not first on that list.
Oh, I've got 4 pages actually. How about Marjorie Chalk?
Maria?
Maria?
Remember to hear me, it's easier.
Please come up to the podium.
Yeah, please come to the podium, that way it'll be a little easier. Oh, okay.
Fine.
Okay, I can see.
I'd like to.
You can bring the microphone back to you.
Thank you. On the map, I can see that Tremont is R1B. It's the only street connecting 2 other areas. It looks like a dumbbell, and I want to know why it was singled out not to be the same as Villa, Crescent, Planecrest, Linden, St. Nicholas, Carolina, so on and so forth. Why? What was the reason it was altered uniquely?
Is there anything else? Is there anything else, ma'am? As stated by the chairman at the beginning of the meeting, we are going to collect the questions and answer them at one time at the end of the meeting. It's not going to be interactive. So if you have other questions, please state them now. We'll note those and we'll respond at one time at the end.
Well, I'll give you a notation since you're asking for something else. The increase of density will cause our taxes to be utilized for additional school buildings. And I don't believe any resident in Fort Thomas has asked for additional density. So I would like the city council to consider that when they do their voting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Howard Lang. Is Howard here? Howard Lang. Or L-E, I'm sorry, Howard Lung. I'm sorry.
Please come up to the microphone or you need to brought you to it. Okay.
Okay, if you don't want to speak, that's fine. Yeah, just for clarification, if you did not speak, you did not have to sign. Next is Trish Schnelly. Or Karen. Sorry, Karen. It's a little lighting is not great up here. Great question. Schnell, yeah, okay. Krishna? Good. Maureen Krebs. Daniel Crocker?
Hello. I live in North Thomas Avenue, and so I did have a question about the overlay specific to the avenue. I don't totally understand the motivation for it. And the reason I want to understand the motivation for it is because I don't think it's
really don't think it's too limiting. But the same people who are trying to save Liberty Avenue, I do have concerns in the future that they will say people continue to make changes that they don't like, and that the rules would get more strict in the future once we start down this path. Really nothing in and out would affect me, but I do want to make changes of my own. And I worry that people will still complain that they don't like what the people on the avenue are doing, and then they will try to make more strict rules in the future. So the reason I bring that up, I just want to understand who has the complaints and who is pushing to make those changes. Thanks.
Okay, next we have Danny Perez.
Give me the law. They're up as high as they
Please?
go. Oh, the lights. Who said the lights?
No.
Sorry, I thought you said lights.
I have two questions. Why are multifamily apartment buildings exempted in residential overlays from the same constrictions that single families are? And what type of improvements does the city intend to make within our districts that may be charged to us? An example would be like, are you going to get rid of the telephone poles along the avenue through these new districts? And if so, is it going to be cost effective to us, or you're going to do that? That's it. There's a
Next is Sharon MacKnight.
This is Sharon MacKnight, 62 Lane. As you may know, I've attended every meeting on these proposed zone changes, bringing my son along the video and record them. Richie MacKnight, who's back there recording it now, thank you. This effort was aimed to provide transparency to our community, allowing residents to see firsthand how these meetings are conducted and whether they truly reflect our collective interests. Unfortunately, I believe they do not. Currently, the way these proposed changes are being handled is similar to building a beautiful home without proper blueprints, without a comprehensive review and updated meaningful community input. We are setting ourselves up for potential problems down the line. It has been nearly 6 years since the city's comprehensive plan was reviewed. This plan services as the foundation for any changes, and without it, we risk making decisions that do not reflect the true needs and desires of our community. It is essential to update this plan before moving forward with any proposals. Just because the city claims they have been working on these proposed changes for too long does not excuse the city from doing it correctly. If it was probably at the onset, it would never take this long in the first place. Additionally, I want to highlight the absence of our city's historic preservation consultant, Wes Cunningham, and his reports and these discussions. As we review changes to our two local historic districts, the Town Center and Midway, along with the historic Howard Park overlay and the proposed Avenue overlay, how can we safeguard our town's rich heritage without professional expertise and established guidelines? In closing, I respectfully ask this board to initiate a review of the outdated comprehensive plan and prioritize actual community input. This could be achieved by conducting a survey mailed to all residents designed by an independent entity experience and gathering unbiased feedback before going any further on this proposed zone changes. If the city can efficiently distribute tax bills, it can certainly manage this crucial survey. And putting scores of residents in a public hearing to discuss a complicated 458-page UDO that contains community input and letting each person just 3 minutes to speak is quite frankly unacceptable. We deserve way better than this. Thank you.
Next is Tiffany Huber.
Tiffany Huber, 26 California Avenue. The proposed zoning ordinance appears to be influenced by personal agendas rather than the community's majority voice. This issue stems from a 2017 city survey that was intended to shape the 2018 comprehensive plan, which was only released to the public in 2023. The community plan should guide the zoning plan, but many feel it reflects the desires of a few rather than true community input. And so citizens believe their voices have been ignored. And even though their taxes fund this very government and the CT consultants, who again are hired by city administration, essentially the city is using our taxpayer money to oppose what the majority wishes. Government action should align with the Constitution's preamble. And one of those things is making sure that there's domestic tranquility. Help me understand how these goals can be achieved if the city plans prioritize personal agendas over the majority's wishes. You guys have spent a lot of time on this, your free time. There's been lots of people out here who have spent a lot of countless hours attending city meetings to ensure transparency and show their commitment to our town's future. It was disappointing at one of the plan and zone meetings to hear CT ask the plan and zone members, what is your pleasure? Shouldn't it be what the community's pleasures are, since we're the ones footing the bill? The requested changes we have at this time are less density. This is something we've talked about the entire time. 70% single-family homes and 30% multifamily units. We don't want or need any additional mixed-use or apartment buildings, as this increases density and detracts from the small-town charm. Please remove this from the proposed UDO for both central business districts. The community has not asked for maximum setbacks on R1B and R1C properties. Please remove this also from the proposed unified draft ordinance. And you mentioned in one of the last meetings that this cannot be regulated, so please remove this as well. Our call to action is for you all to submit a zoning ordinance to the council that takes into account these provisions. And we appreciate what you've done so far in terms of keeping everything from 50 to 40 feet and preventing non-residential over commercial in AP Mix 1. Again, the zoning should align with community desires. This is one of the last times that were commercialized for profits or special interest. People love Fort Thomas for its uniqueness, which is why they stay here or they come here. Our town's legacy is at stake and the community majority voice must be heard. Will you represent and stand up for us today?
Next up is Joan Ferris.
For 3 years, we've been told that one day, someday, there would be a public meeting where residents could ask questions and make comments about the new UDO before there would ever be a vote on it. Tonight's meeting is certainly not turning out to be that, not even close. I expected someone at the table to have the stopwatch set to 3 minutes, standing at the ready to cut the mics or shut down the speakers as soon as his little watch started beeping. That's what we've had in the past. This is demeaning and disrespectful, at the least, and a full-on suppression of free speech at the most. Setting 3-minute limits is an abuse of this process. I'm thousands of dollars
amount will be needed to hire and train someone to be even remotely capable of comprehending, let alone implementing it. We hope this new UDO will be better than the paper on which it is written. Case in point, since 2012, Thomas has had a zoning ordinance with specific unavailable mandates. The most clearly defined, yet most deliberately ignored mandate is that a signed certificate of appropriateness is required before a building in certain zones can be plowed down. The Design Review Board, who approves and signs all COAs, never saw and never signed a COA before buildings were demolished to make room for one island. In an open meeting, a city employee lied and assured the gallery that he had acquired a signed COA. Later, a phone call with me, this guy lied again and assured me he had a copy of the COA and would email it to me. In another email, he finally admitted that there was never a COA submitted or signed prior to or since the full demolition of the buildings, and one island was born. So, once bitten, twice, I suppose, the market is open for any rule or any restriction in between cracks in this UDO to be overlooked on the very whim of someone in power. They always stop till the damage has been done. All this at a time, I can only use two statements from the board members. First, the people on this board are going to be passing away soon. The city can buy those homes, and then we can do whatever we want, since the city does not have to apply our zoning rules. That was said in open meeting. The second, as the board member openly stated, it doesn't matter what's in the UDO, we can always grant a waiver or allow a variance to do what we want. Case closed. I really thought our city was better than this. Apparently not. This is beyond belief.
Next up is Marie Beth Senzel.
That's me, Brenda. Hey guys, how are you guys? So I just want to tell you, I really don't have any questions because I don't want to wait another hour to hear the answer. But I do have some comments. And let me see, I can actually pull my little note up here that I was making. These ladies are far more professional and organized than I am, and they made notes, or they made documents. I have, wherever I scribbled on my note. So, oh, there we go. Oh, but while I'm waiting, I will start off with telling, is it Alyssa, this is Fort Thomas, and we do not have a downtown. We have an uptown. And as long as you have been working on this, I feel like you should have already known that. That's really almost one of the problems that I would like to get out, which is we do not feel like we are being heard. That's what they told you. That's what everybody has been coming to all of these meetings about, trying to explain what we are distressed about. Another thing is, because I did have more, I keep losing it. There we go. I also would like to thank Richie MacKnight for doing this, but I'm going to tell you something. If the MacKnights had been on vacation this summer, got taken out by a semi, this should be the city's responsibility to be videoing and recording these meetings. The fact that a private citizen has to do it and make it available, not through the city or anything else, is appalling. We are Fort Thomas. What are we so proud of if this is the way that we are going to run our city without any kind of transparency or direct communication to our citizens? We've asked multiple times for the city to more clearly communicate on all kinds of things. And this is only taking your guys' piece into account. Along the lines of that, I know that there were all kinds of meetings that we could come in and discuss this UDO and whatever you guys want to do, maybe at 9:30 on a Thursday morning. Guess what? Working people can't make that. How come there hasn't been an all-day Saturday event that everybody can come to be able to mingle with their fellow citizens and look at that? That's a rhetorical question. It's not a real question. Now I can't even read that note. And the last thing is, I want to that whatever kind of, I sat at the meeting in June and I listened to Mayor Costa go on and on about how the new facade of these giant buildings are going to have 35-foot differences in what the facade looks like, so that they look like different buildings. They don't look like different buildings at all. But then I sit here and hear that on the avenue, we're going to maintain a setback so that we're not going to mess up the line of different houses. So that's all I really want to say. But I just want to give you know, ma'am, that I really think that some of the resentment we have towards this process is indicative of your refusing to use the right terminology for our town. Thank you.
Next, we have Mike and Carol Woody.
We can decide that when we came in.
Okay. You don't have any time. Dan Arco.
Anyway, my name is Dan Argo. I live on South Thomas Avenue in the R3 zone between Tower and Grand. My home was a two-family. We invested in remodeling and reclassifying it as a single family. My family and I greatly appreciate the Fort Thomas community. It's focused on family, sense of community, education of our children, and so on. Since owning our home, I've had a growing concern about the degrading condition of many of the rental and multifamily structures in our community, similar to the comments about density and those things that have been said tonight. I recently became aware of the proposed UDO and would like your help understanding some of the nuances. In reviewing the Fort Thomas Avenue overlay, I see desirable or acceptable restrictions for setbacks and carports and all those things. However, I see significant gaps in where the overlays apply in our R3 zone as well as other areas. The plan excludes non-commercial R3 properties that are in the most need of the restrictions and efforts to preserve our small town community feel. Across the street from my home are several 1,500, 3,000 square foot homes that have been excluded. There were also several 6 and 8, 10-plex units sitting on lots that are only large enough for a single family if it was rebuilt. Again, back to the density comment that we heard tonight. The FAQ on the planning site describes the ordinance as dedicated to the protection of traditional development patterns and neighborhood character along Fort Thomas Avenue. From my view, the effect of not equitably applying those restrictions to all the structures in those zones only allow continual degrade and an eyesore of those properties in our community, allowing more future overly dense development. So I ask all of you to consider the voices heard tonight and that feedback and accurately apply those restrictions across the overlay area. Thank you.
Next up, we have Wayne Turner.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Wayne Turner. I live at 21 Green Street, Fort Thomas, Kentucky. I have unique kind of exposure to the city of Fort Thomas. I spent 20 years here working as a police officer, retired as a lieutenant. I remember Fort Thomas as it was, working with folks, great leaders like Jeff Wine, Mayor Urschel, and of course Mayor Brown now. But this new organization, and the reason I'm here tonight is to speak in opposition to the Tower Park Historical Overlay District. I have a house on Green Street I bought in roughly 1992. That house has increased in value approximately tenfold. I'm also the past president of the Military Commons Homeowners Association. We work hard to bring these properties into historical guidelines to, again, provide guidance to our fellow residents to improve our properties, at the same time maintain their historical significance. So again, I look at this overlay and I'm concerned. I'm concerned both for the future and currently. I'm a retiree, so living on a fixed income. you're kind of set on what you can do. I don't know if council has reviewed the economic impact to the residents of, in this case, the historical overlay. My homeowners association does some research on this, and we polled our membership. Almost all of us, when we have members speaking to as well tonight, the homeowners insurance policy will increase approximately 18% for me because of being in that historical overlay. Because in the event of a devastating disaster and that house being raised, the requirement to restore that house above and to what a historical panel would review and determine the house would have to be repaired to. Again, it's driving up cost. So I'm speaking here tonight with this committee, and you hired outside consultants for those on council. I would ask you to represent us on this. There's been very little feedback for the residents on Green Street. Again, we have 10 families and they make up the Military Commons Homeowners Association. In my perception, we are adding another layer of government bureaucratic oversight to an organization that already exists in cooperation with the city of Fort Thomas when we set up our bylaws and ordinances. So again, I would urge council members to please listen to the residents here tonight as they speak out about these changes. They have long-term effects and they have immediate effects in the way of economic outlay for the residents that are here. Again, I'm a retired military also. I take a lot of pride in being a military veteran. Fort Thomas is affiliation to the military. But at the same time, bringing in outside consultants. What happened to General Thomas in the city seal? He's gone. Cross cannons are gone. That's part of our history. I thank you each tonight.
Next is Elizabeth Allergen.
Hello, I just want to state a couple of facts first, and then I'll go into some questions. Since I haven't gotten all of the CT consultant invoices, but through January of this year, approximately $150,000 of our tax money has been spent on this process. The document that you're referring to, the UDO, is 450 pages, and as someone had mentioned, even trying to find that document on the website, it is a challenge. And if you find it once, you're good, but man, trying to go back and find it a second time, that's a challenge. At one council meeting, our city manager made a statement when we were questioning what the citizens want. Which, by the way, the citizens, they're at the top of the flow chart. It's the citizens, the mayor, and it goes down from there. So we need to all keep that in mind. The city manager made a statement. It's not what the developers want. Nothing should be driven by what the developers want through this. Statements have been made by two design and review board members that they will never go against the property owners. We have seen that back in Alexandria Circle, where a house was allowed to build something. It should have never been allowed. And our preservationist, West, he noted that, but since the barn doors were open, we couldn't close them. So we had to allow it again. The frequently asked questions that is on the website, I would have thought that that would have been provided by the planning committee, planning commission as a whole, put together to answer those questions, maybe by Mrs. Barbian, who is going to be championing this project and overseeing the implementation, but that's not what was done. It was provided by CT consultants. Leading to my question, do we as taxpayers want to be tethered to CT consultants for the entirety of this document? It's 450 pages. I have no expectation of any planning commission member to be able to decipher that document and implement it. I feel assured that if we were to question each one of you members on a specific point in that document, understandably, we would probably get several different answers. That's not to any fault, but it's a 450-page document that I do not feel, as a city and as taxpayers, that we want to be beholden to a consultant. That is not the purpose of a consultant. I work with a consultant in my business. They set up a system. We implemented it. We do not use them on a regular basis. If we run into instances, which are far and few between, we consult with them. But with the 450-page document, I fear we will be just pouring money after money to CT consultants. And that's not how I want my tax dollars to be spent. And I think our only hope and prayer for this is for council members to vote no on this. We do recognize that there are deficiencies.
Next up is Tiffany Bailey. David Abbott.
I'm Dave Abbott, and I live at 419 North Thompson. So I'm in the FTA-O. I don't know why that's funny. Ms. Allerton addressed a lot of my concern. The document, as I went through it, was difficult. And my request, and I probably should have just asked to contact the person on the list. I'd like to be able to go through it to identify what exactly is expected of me as a resident of that overlay district, because it wasn't clear to me at all. If there are other provisions that have applied in the past, then that's great. I just can't figure out how they've changed. So if I could walk through the documents with that person, I don't need you to send me a copy or anybody else a copy. Or I saw there was actually a big copy over there, but I still, in going through it, I couldn't identify how does this affect me. So I would appreciate your help.
Next is Ken Middleton. Emily Hucker.
Hi, my name is Emily Hucker. I live at 1718 North Fort Thomas Avenue. I would piggyback on what Daniel said. I just want to understand the motivation behind it. I guess I look at it as the avenue people are the ones being penalized, and I see it as like I can't build an attached garage, is what the way I understand it, if I'm not understanding it wrong. But my neighbor across the street can build a 3-car garage if she wanted to. It doesn't seem very fair. So that's why I'm just here to understand the motivation behind it.
Gary Food.
Hi, I'm Gary Food, 711 North Fort Thomas Avenue, directly across from Johnson. When I look through the proposed zoning changes, it seems like that they're largely structural in nature, and they really don't take into account the overall aesthetic and experience of living in town. And what I noticed in particular is I'm being asked to be part of this Fort Thomas overlay district, yet in that it's just a blanket application of a set of rules. And then I look over at the constraints on lighting and things, those kinds of aesthetics, and those are coupled and they apply universally to the entire town or city. And so my question is why are things like lighting being coupled from the particular overlay districts or zonings changes that are being made in this. And the prompt of my question comes from my experience with the New Johnson on Tree. It's lit up like a Las Vegas strip, and that's a real change. And what North Thomas Avenue was historically, which is I understand is the driver for this plan, is there is some degree of preservation of the way things are. So it's a massive change, and I don't see anything that would stop that from any of these other changes that are happening in zoning, because they're so related to the structure, placement, and not the overall aesthetics. So my question would be, why are the aesthetics really decoupled from the structural features of this zone? Thank you.
Next is Stephen Harry.
Members of the Planning Commission, my name is Steve Meggerly. I reside at 7 Green Street. I'm also an attorney who practices land use planning and zoning. I had a conversation with the city attorney briefly. I would say that I believe that there have been some issues with how this hearing has been conducted. This is a trial type hearing on a zone change under Lowell versus McDonald, or Son Junction Baptist Church versus City Shepherdsville, and Armstrong versus Campbell County Planning Commission. You have to allow cross-examination in live time. Public comment does not comply with procedural process to allow for a trial type hearing. I think that there may be an avenue to redo this, but that was not initially why I came to speak. So I would caution the Planning Commission that you're not conducting your appropriate trial by hearing under KRS 100. I'm here to speak on the Tower Park Overlay District regulations. My first question that I would like to ask Ms. Duffy or your staff for the purposes of cross-examination would be, I did not see in your presentation how the Tower Park Overlay District was part of the comprehensive plan, and where the comprehensive plan says that the historic overlay district is recommended by the last autonomous comprehensive plan. That's question number one. Question number two is as to process. Who will complaints be made to, and how soon will complaints under section 3 on duty to repair, who will those complaints go to, and how quickly will they be acted upon? Are those complaints being made to the zoning administrator, the code enforcement officer, or the historic preservation officer to review and determine whether or not there's been a violation of property maintenance code? Also, I live both sides of Green Street, face right-of-ways and public property. On this side, which would be the north side, they face the playground, which is up the street as well, and the rear faces another public structure with a mess hall. That is unique. So another question is, are these rules going to apply not only to the rear of the homes on both sides of Green Street, because they both either face public property or a public right-of-way, or are they going to be simply applicable to the front of the street, which is the normal situation? That is it, and I would ask that you make a friendly amendment for Green Street that the applicability of these regulations with regard to alteration or new construction, and I would ask the chair if I could have leave to finish my question based on what I've articulated in the beginning. I would ask that there be a friendly amendment for Green Street to allow the applicability of the regulations only be applicable to the front of the homes that face Green Street and not the rear of the houses, which also under the regulations as they're currently drafted, both they face either public property or public right-of-way and are visible from the public right-of-way. So I would ask that before this gets to council, that you would make a amendment to that regulation. Actually, so with that being said, I have other questions, but due to the way that this process is being conducted, I would say that we probably need a redo hearing whether it's actually by cross-examinations to comply with the rule versus the county. Thank you very much.
Point of order, how is the commission going to address Mr. Regularly's comment that this is not being held properly?
All the comments will be addressed after the closure of the comment period.
But no, that's not acceptable. That's the absolute problem. That's the problem.
We'll address that period in a minute. So, the final sign-in that we have for comment period at this point is Peggy Mockingham. And let me just, before Peggy starts, is there anyone else that wishes to provide comments or questions this evening that didn't have an opportunity to sign in? Okay, thank you.
Good evening. As Elizabeth indicated, on the top of the organizational chart for Thomas are the citizens. I was shocked when I saw that. And what was shocking to me is that, why it was shocking to me is it seems like over the past 3 years, when this board analyzed years of issues concerning the zoning rewrite, citizens were the last consideration that was ever made in the analysis. As the issues were discussed over the 3 years, comments from some of y'all like, this will hinder development, developers won't like this, or I personally like this, or I personally don't like that. But there was never a concerted effort by this board or by city employees to actually find out what citizens really wanted. Over the 3 years, this commission or anybody employed by the city asked for much less obtaining a survey. When this administration was asked time and time again for a survey just to find out what citizens wanted, it was denied. As I sit here today, know what people who talk to me want. They don't want increased density, and they certainly don't want the downtown that we keep hearing about. I know for the last 24 years, many of you have put forth this vision that we're going to have this thriving central business district. In 24 years, it's never happened. We don't want a downtown. We like our small town. I think it's time for you all to look at what this vision should be. To that point, the comprehensive plan now is going on 6 years old, and it needs to be looked at and revised. Over these 3 years, I never saw the only objective piece of evidence that we have that shows what citizens actually do want, and that's the survey that was done in 2016 for the comprehensive plan. In that survey, for example, respondents overwhelmingly said that they did not want more housing in the business districts. However, that's exactly what the UDO brings us. Another example, the respondents said that they overwhelmingly said they did not want more density in the business districts. Yet the complaint that the majority of you brought to us says this, and I quote, as a goal, increase critical mass of retail and mixed-use housing, which is exactly what's going to happen under the UDO, and which is exactly against what citizens said they wanted. When Elisa started this project 4 years ago, that very first meeting, she said that this process was brought to us to effectuate the comprehensive plan, that parts of are against what citizens actually went. I have never heard faculty in the discussion anything about what the historical consultant was saying. You've never actually asked the historic consultant to come. He's come to none of the meetings. Beth Johnson, who's the head of the Cincinnati Preservation Association, has volunteered on numerous occasions to come to meetings at no cost. How you can zone a historic district without an historic expertise is absolutely beyond me. So I would just ask you tonight, before we proceed, please ask what the citizens want. Let's do a survey. Let's find out what people really, really want before we change Fort Thomas forever. Thank you.
And again, are there any further comments or questions? Okay, with that, we'll close the public comment period, and I think in the interest of everybody's time, we can take a brief 10-minute intermission if anybody wants to use the restroom or check their phones. Everybody, please take your So as we begin our discussion, the questions that were raised during the comment period, Elise is going to begin with the responses to the specific questions that were asked, and we're also, since there was several items, we're focused on the North Fork Thomas Avenue overlay district. We're going to give some additional explanation of the overlay district there. And just procedurally, the way this is going to work, we're going to go through the questions. We'll discuss them among ourselves with the planning commission, staff, and CD consultants. And then if we haven't responded to whoever asked the specific questions, you can feel free to ask any follow-up questions if you wish to do so, and we'll try to respond to those and make sure we address whatever questions you may have.
Point of order. What was the recommendation from our lawyer regarding?
Well, that's what I was just saying. So we're going to be allowed, we're going to respond to the questions that were addressed specifically, and then you'll be able to cross-examine us as needed if we did respond appropriately to your questions.
There's people left.
That says it all right there, Mr. Warren. A grin, a smirk, that was so disrespectful.
So anyway, that's the way that the process is going to work. Anybody that has follow-up questions, feel free to do so. So with that, I'll turn it over to Elise.
So I think, I believe the lady in the black is strong, is that correct? You have asked a question about why Tremont Avenue is zoned the way it is, which is R1B. As I stated during the presentation, the existing residential zoning districts have all been retained, and none of the zoning district boundaries were changed through this process. And so your property today is R1B, and it would be R1B under the UDO.
That wasn't my question. It was, why isn't it the same color as the adjacent street?
Because at the time that subdivision was developed, it was zoned R1B. And so because of that, it's so that as the time was developed, and it will continue to be that in the future.
So you're saying all the light blue is R1B?
No, the green, like you see on the screen,
Yeah,
right here for Tremont.
it's different. That's why I said, why is it different?
Okay, so the zoning districts themselves vary by the lot development standards. So for example, R1B has different lot standards than R1C and R1D.
Yeah, I understand that. Why is it different than the adjacent streets?
Because, for example, if the lot sizes are different on West Bella Place than they are on Tremont Avenue.
Not necessarily. Take a look.
And I understand that. But that is the rationale behind zoning districts.
But that's not true. Take a look.
And we were not charged with evaluating every single solitary subdivision and deciding whether or not they have the correct zoning district for the residential districts. We were asked to retain all the existing residential districts and to keep every property that was zoned single family zoned exactly the same under the UDO as it is today.
So are you saying that Villa is not residential?
It is residential.
Then why isn't it R1B?
Because the residential districts go from R1AA, R1A, R1B, R1C, and R1D.
Well, the light blue doesn't have any R's on it.
I'm sorry?
The light blue does not have any R's on it.
So let me zoom out a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so you can see, for example, the light blue over here is R1C.
So are you saying that the other streets adjacent to Tremont are all R1C?
Correct.
They're just unmarked.
There's a legend on the zoning map itself that shows, and you can see here, that what all the colors mean.
And so why is it they're different? Because your remark that it's the size of the lots doesn't hold when you look at the map.
In some cases it does, and in other cases it doesn't.
So don't tell me stuff that isn't true. I don't care if you say we just arbitrarily picked it out, but don't tell me it's because of the size of the lots.
In most cases,
I was going to say, we didn't pick the zoning, we just aren't changing anything that historically had been developed several years ago, so we're just not changing it.
and in most cases, the zoning district, the differences between zoning districts is the size of the lot, for example, or the width of the lot, for example. And so I may not necessarily hold in every situation. That is the case now. But let me pull up from my presentation something that can show you that. So as you see here, those across the top of this chart are the zoning districts that I just mentioned. They are differentiated by lot size. So for example, in the R1AA, the minimum lot size is 43,560. But it is 7,500 in the R1B, but only slightly smaller for the R1C, which is 7,000. We did not.
I don't need you to read these charts to me. I looked them up. I'm aware of what the charts say. What I was speaking to is the fact that when you said it's because of the lot sizes, when you look at the map that's color-coded, it just doesn't hold. If it's because it refers to something that was done many years ago, that makes more sense.
And that is true. If you will notice, there's a slight difference between R1B and R1C. In R1B, the minimum lot size is 7,500 square feet. In R1C, it's 7,000. And you really can't discern a 500 square foot difference between lot sizes when you're looking at the zoning map. But again, in most situations, it is because of the lot size and the lot width. But as the chair said, it is historically a situation where these are the lots were zoned at some point in time in the past, and we didn't change that. Is there anything else I can answer for you about your particular street? So we had several questions about Fort Thomas Avenue overlay district. And one of those questions, I've asked one person, or more than one person, asked a particular question about why we weren't regulating the multifamily uses that are along Fort Thomas Avenue. And we actually are, but not in the Fort Thomas Avenue overlay district. I'm trying to get to that slide. So one of the significant changes that we are making to the R3 parcels located on Fort Thomas Avenue is that we are putting additional standards on it. As this new overlay district for Fort Thomas Avenue is being discussed, several community members did request additional standards for the multifamily properties along the avenue, and consequently the base for draft requires that R3 properties along Fort Thomas Avenue must have an entrance facing Fort Thomas Avenue. They must have a pedestrian connection, such as a path to connect it to the sidewalk. They have to have transparent materials, which include windows and doors or required other facades facing Fort Thomas Avenue. And the front setback must be within 3 feet of the average front setback. So because of those discussions that we had with community members, we did add standards for the design of those R3 properties along Fort Thomas Avenue. In terms of the maintenance questions that were asked.
Yes. The question still stands though, why exclude the multifamilies from into R3 zone from overlay restrictions? If those restrictions are good for the neighborhood and the appearance and aesthetics and structure and everything else, why not equally apply those to all the structures in that zone?
So in terms of that, if you looked at the Fort Thomas Avenue overlay district, it really does regulate things that are unique to single-family detached dwellings. Things like where can the attached garage go? And you can't enclose your porch with flats.
Those are all mostly aesthetic.
They are structural, they're not necessarily aesthetic.
If folks don't want to see those in a single family, why do they want to see them in a multifamily?
But as I was saying, let me try to rephrase that. When we start talking about things like where can the attached garage go, that applies to a single-family detached dwelling, but it doesn't apply to like the picture that you see on the street up here. The other thing I would point out, again, based upon several other discussions that we had with community members, we have also prohibited parking in the front of these multifamily dwellings that are all around, and basically everywhere. Because we felt very strongly that if you put parking in front of these buildings, whether it's along Hollywood Drive, which is this picture, or the R3 units that are all on Fort Thomas Avenue, if you put parking in front of those buildings, between the buildings and the street, you would end up with a situation that would dramatically change the character. So we did add those standards as well to enhance or at least preserve what Fort Thomas Avenue looks like today. Because potentially, you know, this property, you know, this property could ultimately be developed, and you could end up with it.
It ended up as a multi-family apartment with street facing garages.
You can't, because it's not permitted in the parking standards, and it's not permitted in the parking standards.
A street facing garage would not be permitted.
Correct, correct,
It's not in the overlay.
correct, because those standards are actually in the parking chapter. So you can't have parking in front of that building. You can't have, you know, the new way today is to have carports for multifamily structures. You're allowed to have that. That way is torn down. But all of those standards are different places in the ordinance. Does that answer those good questions?
Yeah, I guess it's just so confusing that if those standards are in place, why exclude them? If the standards and requirements are still there, it's confusing.
I get that it's, and there's another gentleman, I'll get there, I promise. There's another gentleman who asked about maintenance, in terms of these R3 properties. Unfortunately, maintenance is not a zoning code issue, it is covered under the maintenance code, which is a separate issue. So that is not something that we can address through zoning. Yes, ma'am, there you are.
So this slide that we're looking at right now, is this for future buildings or existing buildings right now?
So, as I said previously, there's nothing about zoning that can force someone to change their property. But if this building is torn down at some point in time in the future, they would not be allowed to, for example, turn the building around and face the parking lot, because in those situations, the parking is behind the building for these parking structures. And what's happened in many communities is when these buildings are torn down, the building faces the parking lot, and the building addresses the parking lot, and the back of the building is facing Fort Thomas Avenue. So to prevent that from happening, you have these standards. And so not only does the back of the building face Fort Thomas Avenue, you have air conditioning units and all of these other things. And suddenly when you allow that to happen, the character of the avenue changes dramatically. And so that's what these standards are meant to prevent.
So is there anything in the overlay that says if you have a parking building, you have parking in the back existed already, that your residents need to use that parking lot and stay off the street?
So street parking is a separate issue that is outside of zoning. And I hate to be sounding like a broken record in that respect, but in terms of where people park, we can say where the parking lot can be located. For example, I said the parking can't be between the building and the front lot line, but whether or not they utilize street parking is not something that is regulated through zoning.
Right, I mean, public parking in the public right of way is public parking. So you can't say this person can park here, but that person can't park here.
Well, it's just something like you were saying, they could park on this avenue if there's a new building, but it's kind of the impression of the community.
I think she's confused. I think, I don't know if this is on, can you hear me? I think you're confused when she says parking in front. She means a parking lot in front of the building, not the street. You can't build a parking lot.
You can't put a parking lot.
Correct. All right, does that make more sense? Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you, ma'am, I apologize.
It is, okay.
Yes, sir.
So what's the process for
rezoning if, for example, in between two single-family homes, there's a multi-family unit that might be zoned R3 currently. Somebody comes in and buys it, turns it into a single-family, are they then, what's the process for rezoning that to meet the overlay standards?
So at that point in time, if it happened, then either the property owner or the city would have to initiate that change.
Property owners would have?
Or the city.
I wouldn't.
Right.
So what is there a process in place to manage that? Because that literally happened on Avenue already, where a double family is turned into a single family, as far as I'm concerned, who knows what the process was.
So in that situation, the double family, the two family is already in the overlay district. What is not in the overlay district are the R3 properties.
Okay. How do you distinguish then, just for my lack of knowledge, how do you distinguish between an R3 and a non-R3 when they're really apartments?
So a two family is exactly what it is. It's two families together, and that's typically called a duplex.
And what's the zoning on that now? It's just, what would it currently?
It may be, R1B or R1C or maybe R3. We individually looked at every single parcel along the avenue, and if it had a single family dwelling or a two family dwelling, the overlay district is placed on top of it. And just a definition that you understand, a multifamily is 3 units, 3 dwelling units, or more.
Okay.
But your question for that, is one that we didn't consider, which is, for example, what if someone took a 5-unit building and turned it into a...
Like that, I'm not showing anything wrong with that building, but if I were to buy that and turn it into a home for just another family, what is the process for making sure it's in the overlay?
There is nothing in the zoning ordinance that would, as it's currently, in the UDO as it's currently drafted, that would include that within the overlay. So that would be something that as a policy decision, the council and the planning commission can consider.
Very good. Thank you.
Can I ask you, this is kind of your watch, I'm not going to ask you, do you have guidelines in place with the recommendations that Ms. Cunningham gave them?
So the Fort Thomas Avenue overlay district is not a historic district.
Yeah, but I know that, but you're putting protections on them to protect them over the avenue, correct? So he gave suggestions on what kind of guidelines you use to get the proper stuff in place.
So Kevin can speak to this, but to my knowledge, he was not asked about the overlay district because it is not a historic
It's
district.
his report.
I'm sorry.
It's in his report.
The avenue was not in his report. The one that I saw only addresses the two historic districts.
It was addressing the guidelines until you get the official guidelines in place. If
So-
I was understanding correctly, you have it. You haven't read that.
I'm not quite sure where you're going. I'm not quite sure I understand.
It wasn't passed on. Is that what you're saying, Sharon? No. It wasn't. And there are many things that wasn't.
And I'm sorry, I can't really hear either, so if you want to come up to the microphone, I didn't quite understand exactly what
Okay. I'm sorry.
But if I was reading his report right, he was saying, if you want to put an overlay over the whole avenue, and like a protected overlay like we're talking about, which means you want to kind of protect the character of the look of the avenue. That's what we're trying to protect. He suggested using the guidelines that are in the design review board until you get the proper ones in place. I think it makes sense if you get the guidelines down first before you place this on people's property, so they understand it, so when they have questions, they can come up and you can address it properly. That's how it sounded like he reported in that report. And I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the report.
Unfortunately, I don't remember the exact wording, but the idea of the overlay district is that we have the guidelines in place in this document that talk about the particulars of what you can and cannot do, such as the garages, such as roof slopes and things. That's already in there. If it's outside those parameters, they can go to the design review board and ask for latitude. And I'm not answering the question.
was presented and the questions here that would help clear a lot of this up, because you're dealing with a lot of historic districts, and why he's not sitting in on these conversations just blows my mind. It has from the very start. As soon as I found out that the local historic district was put into place in 2002 in the area that I live, in the town center, and he's not sitting here, or we don't have proper guidelines being followed or trained, you think that would be a mandatory thing. If you want to do this correctly, you get the community input, and you get West Cunningham sitting with you the whole time, making sure you don't overstep on people's rights, but you can still protect it. You can protect people's property. You can do it all the way through, like this gentleman was asking about the multi-families. It's the look of the whole avenue. I get what you're trying to do here, but you have good guidelines in place that serve the community as well as the historic heritage. I think people are trying to protect. That's all. Thank you.
Does that make sense to you, Kevin?
I mean,
I think the intent of the Fort Thomas Avenue overlay district is more of a neighborhood character definition. It's not necessarily attributed to any historic element of any one house or property. You could build a brand new house on Fort Thomas Avenue.
yeah, right now, yeah. Right.
And the guidelines that are in effect or proposed, or not in effect, the guidelines we're proposing for the overlay district would apply to new construction or renovations of an existing home. They're not necessarily there for historic preservation purposes necessarily.
I understand that's not in place. I understand what you're saying. You can't do that. You can go and tear someone's house down and just rebuild it the way you want.
And you'll be able to do that after this zoning ordinance as well.
Yeah, but what I'm saying that Wes did say, hey, since you don't give really proper guidelines, that people really design guidelines and what you go by.
Well, they are included in the draft.
And again, these are not guidelines, these are standards, these are regulations. And to my knowledge, his report only dealt with the historic districts for Central Business District and for Tower Park. It did not address the Fort Thomas Avenue overlay district unless something else was.
May I read this?
Sure.
Okay, section 3.9. The language in this section needs to be revised in several places. The purpose of the historic overlay district is to actually preserve the integrity of the area. Therefore, the language reading, I don't even know, let me make sure I'm in the right place. The overall, I'm sorry, I need to get my paper with me. Must be determined to be consistent with the design guidelines and all of that. So I have to sit down.
Yeah, I believe those are for the historic overlay districts in the town center.
And the town center.
In Midway and Tower Park.
But he does address this on here, and I don't know how to work with him, so I'll look it up and I'll ask at a different time.
And like I did mention at the beginning of this meeting, if anybody has additional questions or comments, feel free to contact the city.
I will.
And they'll respond to any questions or comments that you might have.
Yeah, I don't want to hold you guys up. I don't have it right in front of me. I thought you would have it, Kevin would have it. Okay.
So aren't there historical homes on North Fort Thomas Avenue?
They are. There's not any national. There's not any requirement for anyone to do anything specific with those properties. On Fort Thomas Avenue, what the intent wasn't necessarily to preserve any of those homes. It was to preserve the character of the setbacks of the homes. If you wanted to build a new house, we wanted to make sure that it kind of was similar in the distance from the street, the height of the building, the shape of the building, but it doesn't have to preserve literally the existing building. On North Fort Thomas Avenue, there are some sort of preservation, goals for the Midway and for the town center and for Tower Park as well.
And then there was another, go ahead, sir.
We keep saying that the community is asked for these guidelines of, I don't think you know what I'm asking. The community wants to preserve the look of Fort Thomas Avenue. Who is that? Because I live on Fort Thomas Avenue and these rules apply to me. I don't want them to apply to them. I don't want any more rules put on me as an owner. I like the avenue too, but I really, frankly, don't care what the people who live on the side streets think I should do with my home. So that's, I want to know who thinks that should happen. Is it just the design board? Is it a bunch of people in the community that want to control what I do with my house? What's the answer? Because I just don't like the overlay district at all.
I have a quick follow-up.
So we did have a group of citizens who, when we started the zoning ordinance update process, requiring regulation or having regulations for the avenue is not included. But through the process, certain community members, certainly not all of them, came forward and said, let's do an overlay district that really does preserve the village environment, the character of the avenue as it exists today. So yes, there was a certain subset of people who asked for this.
You see where that's unfair, that we get penalized, but my neighbor, right, she can build a garage, and she wants attached, and I can't, she's literally keep it. It's not very fair.
I have a question, follow-up to that. Were you finished?
Yeah, I just want to, I certainly understand your concerns and the city council and the planning commission obviously.
I understand why people look, but I guess I feel like that it should apply to all homes in Fort Thomas. Should not be allowed to build attached garages, et cetera.
If we have it before we move on, are there any other questions that we can answer? Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so my question is, you keep referring to community. What survey was done? When was this meeting held with the community members? And let's just say, who specifically were these community members? Because I have not been to a lot of these meetings, but I did try to watch them. And I do not recall there being community members coming up and specifically asking for guidelines to be put on houses, residential houses on the avenue.
So, I apologize.
No, you're good.
So basically, this came up mostly during the coffee and conversation sessions that were held during the morning and in the evening. So there were opportunities for community members to come in the evening and express concerns.
Were these community members like residents of North Fort Thomas Avenue or South Fort Thomas? Or are these people that live like, in an apartment down on some other street? I mean, I'm on North Fort Thomas, and I don't want all these restrictions put on me for any reason. I mean, we lived there for 39 years. We worked hard to pay for our house. And I don't feel that anybody should be telling us what we can and can't do.
I personally don't know where they are, whether or not any of them lived on Fort Thomas
Can
Avenue.
you get a copy of that and tell us who they are? Or, I mean, what relationship they have to Fort Thomas Avenue?
They all live within the city of Fort Thomas.
What is their stake in it? What is their stake in it? You know, they're not a property owner on North Fort Thomas Avenue, or are they? I mean, could have been one of my neighbors. I don't know. I know one of my neighbors is here. Could have been him.
Yeah, as I said, I don't necessarily know off the top of my head. I mean, I can look at some of the coffee conversation signing sessions.
I mean, we're never notified of any kind of this kind of stuff.
That's what conservative.
But aren't there already regulations before this overlay? Like you can't put a shed in your front yard. I mean, there's certain things that you guys are already abiding to. You just don't want any more restrictions. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, it's not fair that we're the only ones that are realized, but everybody else in Fort Thomas can go attach garages.
Yeah, that's where a survey would help. Would you want this on the property?
And there was another gentleman who was talking about the impacts of Johnson Elementary on North Fort Thomas Avenue. Unfortunately, schools are exempt from zoning. So that doesn't, and that's not a great answer to you, but that
I
is the
wasn't
answer.
just specifically asking about that. I think he was asking about the issue of lighting, in the overlays areas, is going to have residences also.
So the lighting regulations do apply across all of the zoning districts, but the school district is exempt from zoning, which is something that is set by the Commonwealth of Kentucky and is not set by us.
I guess when we were having our discussions about the overlay district over the past few months, there wasn't really any conversation about differentiating the lighting along North Fort Thomas Avenue from any other part of the city.
I haven't looked, but it sounded like because that's where he lives, that he knew that, because he's got lighting per.
Right, and I understand what you're saying about Johnson Elementary. But I guess in terms of the zoning process, there's been discussion about trying to differentiate lighting in one district versus another district. And like Elisa said, the lighting kind of applies citywide. The lighting.
Right, but we're like in this mixed district with, a multi-family next to residential. Multi-families are probably need more lights, right, or back parking or street parking, any of those kind of things. I think that's what he was really getting.
Yeah, I mean, generally, the lighting requirements are uniform across the city. And they're really more intended to try to prevent light trespass on other people's property and those types of things. And I think that might be what he was saying about Johnson Elementary kind of makes that part of Thomas very bright compared to what it used to be. But again, the school district is not subject to zoning.
So before we move off Fort Thomas Avenue, is there anyone else who would like ask us questions or cross-examine us more about what's in the district, the intent behind the district, any of those questions before we move on to other subjects?
Can I see the slide you have on Alexandria Pike, because I was confused as in terms of were you having, it said 60 feet in professional or six stories.
Yeah. So that's
I didn't know if that's the current.
That is the current code. The current code for the Alexandria
Confused me because I felt like it was.
No, so the current professional office district allows 6 stories or 50 feet, which is an odd standard, but nonetheless, that is the standard in the existing. That is what you have today in every place that is professional office. And the professional office district today allows the planning commission to both waive the maximum number of stories as well as the maximum height. And that will not be the case under the UDO. So that is the standards of the professional office today, but not under the UDO.
It does anything other than, what, 20 grand, whatever, 40, meet that.
So the back of 18 North is over 50 feet high. The back of it. And is there anything, we have the Cincinnati Bell building is pretty close to 50 feet. The 2 historic buildings on South Fort Thomas building, the top of that tower is pretty close to 50 feet. So you do have several areas. Yes, the residential. Yes, the 6 or 7 story residential building that is across from the middle school is probably higher than that. I don't know that off the top of my head.
That's right there.
Yes. So before we move on, Fort Thomas Avenue Overlay District, is there anything that anyone else would ask or any other cross-examination I'd like to do?
How will, a lot was said, how was that kind of written down or were you taking notes that what was said this would be discussed about, from the community?
So, okay.
We got an ordinance, so. I have another question.
Yes, sir.
Is the overlay district happening? It's happening, going back on it, or?
So until the zoning ordinance or the UDO is actually adopted, we can't say whether or not it's moving forward or not. So you certainly can send comments and questions and concerns to your city council members, because the way this process works is that the planning commission, and the chair will talk about this more at the end of the public hearing, but the planning commission makes a recommendation to the city council, and then it's the city council's responsibility to either adopt the ordinance as it's posted for them or to make changes. And the city council members as well as the email addresses are on the city's website. Yes, sir.
Well, since you're on the avenue, I just want to make a comment too. It's just, it'd be nice to keep commercial and residential together. Commercial on the first, residential on the second. I heard it before, somebody that were talking, they didn't like that idea. some people in the city, and I just wish there's a lot of that on the avenue, since we're on the avenue, that, and it seemed like, it's working out quite well.
And some places it still would be permitted, for example, in the traditional business district, which is in front of us. But, in the neighborhood commercial office district, it's only going to be permitted where it exists today, and it will not be permitted along Alexander Pike, even though it's permitted today. So there is a significant reduction in what it will be permitted in terms of those multifamily uses over non-residential uses in the UDO, as opposed to what's in the current zoning ordinance.
But I guess the avenue still allow it.
So it's still permitted, as I said, in the traditional business district, which is in Harness, it's still permitted in whether you call it downtown or uptown, as well as the Midway. However, we are dramatically limiting, or we are dramatically regulating that very differently than it is today. So for example, you could pretty much build lot lines and lot line in the central business district today with multifamily above non-residential uses. In the UDO, that would not be permitted because it is being regulated by both building width and building depth. And then in addition to that, any building that has multifamily over non-residential uses like office or retail, that over 5,500 square feet is a conditional use, which gives the board of adjustment an opportunity to place conditions if necessary and gives the city tighter control over large developments. So again, that's a huge difference over what is currently 8%.
But if the building burns down, you can rebuild what you had before.
So today, for example, if a building it burns down, yes, you can do it.
Okay. I thank you.
Oh, I thought you were just saying conditional use. So I got real excited for a minute because I thought you were saying you would prevent another one of those monstrosities, but it sounds like it's just going to be down to a small decision again, and somebody can say, okay, we'll do it.
So again, keep in mind that the existing building that you're concerned about is 50 feet tall, which will not be permitted at all in the uptown area.
So that's not something that can be waived.
Correct. Now, having said that, when I talk about a waiver, that is something that the planning commission has the ability to do.
Right, that's what I was talking about.
Under the Kentucky Revised Statutes, the property owner still has the opportunity to go to the Board of Adjustment and request variance. The city has no ability to change that. But the planning commission no longer has the ability to play height as they currently do, for example, in the professional office district under your existing zoning ordinance.
In the professional office district, that's how I'm saying it, right?
So right now, the professional office district, as it does the 3 locations that it's going to be used, that will no longer be permitted, and the professional office district will not be used along Alexandria Pike.
Okay, but central business district is not in the subject that we're talking about, right?
The central business district has a height restriction of 40 feet unless they go to the Board of Adjustment.
Right.
Or bigger.
Yeah. The small.
Okay. Again, before you involve the Fort Thomas Avenue over district, anybody else have anything they want to say? And as the chair mentioned, I'm going to place that on the screen at the end of this. Kevin's contact information is on the email address, and if additional questions arise, please contact him as well.
Can we have this put on Fort Thomas website, please? Your presentation.
I will provide it to Kevin.
Well, it's kind of difficult, I mean, I'm not being critical. It's just hard to see from way back here, some of those details. Thank you.
And I will provide it to Kevin tomorrow. So at this point, I'm going to, there's nothing else on the board.
Can I ask a question of the planning commission? What is the exit strategy to not be so dependent on CT consultants? Who is going to be the expert on this 450-page document to eliminate, or not eliminate, that's not entirely possible, but to minimize the expense to the taxpayer? Are we going to hire, is the city going to hire their own employee to do this?
We're on staff, and that's our job. It's Mark's job copies as zoning administrator, I'll be there to help. We're enforcing this document.
I'm not talking about, well, I guess I understand
It's our job to enforce it. And we will understand it before we enforce it.
In Kevin's defense, I would say like building code and all those other things that you currently charged with enforcing are similar, like.
Absolutely, yeah. The building code is multiple documents that we have to dig through and find things. And do we know the answer right off the top of our head? Absolutely not. We'll dig in and we'll find the answer. That's what our job is.
So at this point, we're going to move on to Green Street because there were several questions about it as well. So Mr. Meadow, I'm going to go ahead and start addressing some of the ones you asked, and then if you'd like to add or continue the dialogue, we can do that. In terms of the tower park being a part of the comprehensive plan, I don't know. I really don't.
So you don't know where in the comprehensive plan the recommendation to place Tower Park in a new historic overlay exists as we're sitting here?
Correct. I do.
Okay. So I would tell you that the KRS 102.213 subpart A and B in order, because you are having a trial hearing on a zone change, in order for the planning commission to determine that a zone change is appropriate, there's three elements. The first element is that the proposed zone change is in accordance with the comprehensive plan, that's one, or the zone, the current zoning is out of reality, that's KRS 102.13 A and B. So my next question is, please tell me how the current zoning of Tower Park is out of conformity with reality. For example, it began as a residential zone and now it's a mall. That's the classic example of it's no longer in conformance with reality.
There are some nuances in that particular section. And the planning commission and the council can say, and I'll defer to the attorney if I'm wrong, that there are situations where it would be appropriate to change the zoning.
If it's out of step with reality, that's actually the statutory language.
And in that situation, the planning commission has said that the reality is, as I understand it, and if I'm misspeaking, you should let me know, the reality is there is a disjointed method for reviewing alterations to historic properties. Therefore, it would be appropriate in this situation to have the overlay district. And I will defer to either the planning commission or the attorney if they would like to add.
So the third way that the reason for a zone change is that there is a compelling need for the proposed zone change. So I would ask you then if that's also for McDonald, Google versus McDonald. Those are the only three ways that you can recommend that a zoning change, either at Tower Park or the city as a whole, is you have to prove by substantial evidence that one of those things exists. So with regard to Tower Park, I would ask you, please provide the factual basis for a compelling need to change the zoning of Tower Park to implement this zoning overlay district.
And I would say, as I previously stated, that the compelling need would be that there is a disjointed method in reviewing alterations to properties because of the different home situations and the way that the Alexandria, the homes back on the backside here of Alexandria are regulated. And in order to make it more regulated, in order to provide enforcement mechanisms, and in order for there to be a more uniform method of looking at historical operations to these homes, that is a compelling need for the overlay district.
So since we're actually having our cross-examination, I would tell you that what you factually said is incorrect. Number one, Pearson Street has an HOA that is currently in the dissolution stage. Green Street has a HOA that I would say does need some tinkering with regard to cleaning up the language as to whether or not the Department of Interior standards are applicable or not and how stringent they should be applied. That is an internal thing that the Military Commons Homeowners Association can do. With regard to Alexandria Circle, to my knowledge, there is not a homeowners association. So when you say that there is a difference in how the homeowners associations operate, that is factually correct, and that the only one that is active and operating is Green Street. There is not one back there. on Alexander Circle, those homes, they have a memorandum of understanding when those properties were sold. They do not have a homeowners association, and Pearson is in the process of dissolution. So I would ask you again, please tell me that we concur that what I just said is factually accurate instead of what you said.
I just wanted to say that we did not consider the status of the homeowners association in the part of operations.
Well, I would tell you that if your consultant is telling you that out of the three elements to conform with the need for a zone change, one is that you've heard her say that number one, she cannot reference anywhere in your city's comprehensive plan that a historic overlay district in Tower Park is appropriate for a future goal of the community. So strike one. You got that. You have no factual evidence in your record that we're making tonight that this historic overlay is in compliance with your comprehensive plan. Strike one. Strike two is that the zone is no longer in compatibility with reality. You have a residential zone. It's not as if there's been a significant change. You have not torn down houses and built new houses. And it's not going from a residential use to an industrial use, or an industrial use to residential use. So under KRS 100-213, subpart A and B, strike two. The only element that you can hang your hat on in order to do this overlay district is that there's a compelling need in order to pass the overlay district. Now, when you conduct your fact finding, when you close the public hearing again, I'm asking, this is a very specific factual question. What is the compelling reason? Because what I just heard was that there's conflicting HOAs. There are no conflicting HOAs. One is in dissolution status, one doesn't exist, and one is operational. And I will acknowledge that it needs work to get more in compliance with the DO, the current material standards to be more focused. So what is it? I'm asking you a direct question. Strike one, strike two. This is your only shot at doing the zone change. I'm asking your consultant, what is the factual basis for a compelling need for this overlay district that is not this HOA right here?
So what I will say is this, and I'm going to read you exactly the situation. Today, exterior alterations to these historic homes are regulated and reviewed differently depending upon the location of the historic home within Tower Park. When the homes on Green Street and Pearson Street were originally conveyed to the homeowners in 1992, the city of Fort Thomas created a declaration of codes, covenants, and restrictions, which is a deed restriction requiring exterior renovations to be approved by the city, who was named as the developer in the declaration within 60 days of its submittal. The original declaration stated owners shall repair, maintain, and use the units in a manner which will preserve and protect and be consistent with the historic and architectural features of the exterior of buildings. In 1992, one deed restriction covered both Pearson and Green Streets, and the area comprising both streets was called the Military Commons Homeowners Association. In 2004, two separate homeowners associations were created, one for Pearson Street and one for Green Street. The declaration for Pearson Street named the city of Fort Thomas as the developer, and the developer has 30 days to review and approve or disapprove proposed exterior changes. The declaration states, in recognition of the historical value of these properties, members of the association agree to maintain the exterior decor of each unit in accordance with the guidelines provided by the Kentucky Historic Heritage Council and the National Park Service Historic Preservation Guidelines. However, none of those exist. What was probably meant was that the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation were to be used. Again, there was not exactly a need for that. The homes on Cochran Avenue and on Alexander Circle, when the city orchestrated the disposition of those homes on Cochran Avenue and Alexander Circle, the city amended Chapter 36 of the city's Code of Ordinances to require exterior alterations to be reviewed based on Fort Thomas VA Codes architectural guidelines and the Secretary of Interior standards of rehabilitation for historic structures. Because of this amendment to Chapter 36, the Design Review Board reviews exterior alterations to the homes on Cochran Avenue and Alexander Circle and issues a certificate of appropriateness when the exterior changes are approved. To recap, today, city administration reviews exterior alterations to the homes on Green and Pearson Street, and the Design Review Board reviews exterior alterations to the homes on Cochran Avenue. In order to have consistency to these review processes and the design guidelines that are used, that is why there is a compelling need for the Tower Park Historic Overlay District.
So the compelling reason is that there is a difference in applicability between different historic areas within the park.
Essentially, yes. There's a different set of standards and a different set of review procedures. So for example, if you're going to redo your porch on Green Street,
Oh, I know.
you have one set of standards. If you're going to do your porch on Pearson Street, you have another set of standards. And then if you're on Alexander Circle, you don't actually go to the city administration, which is what happens on Pearson Street and Green Street today. You actually have to go to the design review board and get a certificate of appropriateness based on a set of guidelines and certification of standards. It is confusing and it is difficult to administer. And on top of all of that, with the exception of the homes on Alexander Circle, there is literally no way for the city to enforce any violation to the so-called standards that are being used to evaluate the homes on Pearson Street. So therefore, to have a valid method of enforcement, we need to create the zoning overlay district, which is again a compelling reason to do so.
So this regulatory mishmash scheme has been in effect since at least 1993, and most recently since the Alexander Circle homes were done. So my question then is, please explain why that is a substantial alteration for compelling a change in the zoning code right now. I mean, you read the report, I get it, but please, my question is, please provide a compelling reason why the status quo needs to be altered, and what is the compelling reason to alter from the status quo?
We obviously appreciate your questions and your cross-examination, and you bring a lot to the table, and I respect you, and I'm sure you expect me to. I think we're reaching a point where your cross-examination is there, but now you don't like the answers, and you're playing judge too. And so
that's fair.
And so I think we gave your answer. If you think that's not a compelling reason, then you certainly have rights along that avenue. But I think it's been said, and we've hit that.
That's fair. And my only other comment to the Planning Commission is because of the things that were outlined earlier, I would suggest to the chairman of the Planning Commission that before you take any action on this, anything that was before you, zone changes or anything before on the docket tonight, that you had this be continued in progress to allow for another trial-like hearing where those people who may have left and did not have the opportunity to ask questions and cross-examine had that opportunity to do so at a future date. Thank you.
You actually had two other questions. You said who will complaints go to and how quickly will they be acted upon? If this is enacted, those complaints will go to the zoning administrator, which is Mark Stewart. How quickly they will be acted upon, I can't answer that, but I certainly can ask Kevin Mark to address that.
You know, we address those immediately, and the process with varying complaints can last varying different periods of time, but we begin that address immediately upon.
Because I can tell you that right now there are homes on Green Street that there are deteriorating wood, there's deteriorating dormers, and that it is starting to have a very adverse effect on the historic nature of the exterior of the homes. I think that just taking a stroll down Green Street, it would become evident, and it would be plain as day as to the some of the deterioration on some of the homes. Thank you.
And then the third question you had was, right, and you're correct, the Fort Thomas Avenue, the Town Park Historic Overlay District as it's currently drafted would apply, would make almost every facade on some of the homes on Green Street applicable. They would all have to go in front of the design review board if you're making an alteration, say, to your rear porch or something. That was a deliberate policy decision that was made because of the 360 nature of those homes. They were viewed as historic assets that whether you're staying in the park or you're staying on Green Street should be reviewed. But again, that was a policy choice that certainly could be reconsidered.
Well, I would ask the Planning Commission, as I did in my initial presentation, to maybe take up a friendly amendment to that, at least with the houses on Green Street, because they do have that unique ability that they are front or and rear facing either to leave the property or right away. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
And I think Ms. Shulman also had something to say about Green Street.
Hey, one turn, 21 Main Street. Again, I spoke earlier about the opposition to the Tower Park Historical Overlay District. Again, in the past, president of the HOA, we decided to pay, and at that time Jeff Earlwine, and then later Ron Bill. We have amended those bylaws, so apparently what this does, it throws the baby out with bathwater, and essentially, for the purpose of what I'm hearing is enforcement. You're undoing everything that we've done in those bylaws, going back to '92. And again, you gotta realize that Pearson came along after Green Street and Pearson split. The same standards are not applicable to all three areas in the historical overlay district. An example is Alexander Circle, garages that are external buildings that are concrete with decks on them. We could never do that on Green Street, even though at one time we had garages with those units. So again, you see Pearson has a standard, Green Street has a standard, and Alexander Circle has a standard, but you're looking at a universal enforcement standard for all. So I just want you to think about, as you go forward, again, what this does on the economic impact of residents on Green Street by drawing up homeowners insurance for the overlay, historical overlay district. And two, again, like on Green Street, we had no say with the city, and he said repeatedly, cities were exempt, schools were exempt, but we have now what I call Walt Disney in my backyard, where trees have been taken down, boundary trees have been taken down, they've fallen down, where now we see hammocks back there during the summertime. We see people standing looking in the backs of our houses. So again, I would just ask the city to be a good neighbor and work with us as well. But again, don't disregard what we've done since 1992 with the HOAs. Thank you.
If I could, sorry, one last thing, I apologize, and this last thing I'm saying. Ms. Duffy did mention that the covenants for Green Street are deed restrictions. The deed restriction as a matter of law runs with the land and will survive any zone change during an overlay. So what we have is in perpetuity versus a zone change. A different planning commission, a different city council could come in 2 years from now, or 4 years from now, or 10 years from now, and amend the zoning code, especially during the comprehensive plan and the zoning rewrite process, and take this out. So what we have right now is in perpetuity, and that is much different with regard to a deed restriction than a simple map amendment to the city's zoning ordinance. So I want that to weigh in because that is an important thing that we already have these deed restrictions and some stuff we showed, which kind of contradicts the compelling reason that we already have something that is in perpetuity versus something that a future administrative board such as the planning commission or legislative board of the city council can take away. Thank you. And I'm done now.
So I believe that was all of the questions that were directly asked about the UDO.
Do any board members have any questions?
Hold on, I think Mrs. MacKnight has a question.
She brought up maximum setbacks. Now, I brought up the review of the comprehensive plan. We don't know how mural stuff put back. We were gone. I mean, we were part of the community and even the things that they can be regulated that they were put back in. And we might better implement more better to somebody else. Why were they put back in?
So I believe it was when the planning commission and the city council met the last time, which was on July 31st. There were discussions of murals between both bodies. And I don't want to speak for Tim Schneider, but I will try to relay his concerns. And Mr. Professor, if you want to step in as well. There was a discussion about whether or not murals should be regulated or not regulated. And again, I don't want to speak for him, but Mr. Schneider felt like if you were going to that, murals were ultimately going to come our way, and it was better to have standards by which to judge them, as opposed, and usually that was ultimately going to come our way because of free speech issues, which is again a constitutional issue. And so he felt it would be better to have standards by which to judge them than to try to deal with the free speech issues absent those standards. Mr. Professor, would you like to add anything to that?
I have nothing to add to Mr. Schneider's position.
Yeah, again, I apologize to be speaking for him.
But you can't regulate the content, and that is the whole community's concern. And I thought at the time, the community was concerned. And that's why
well, it's not you, but
And again, because it would be a conditional use within the central business district. There will be 2 levels of review. You would have to go in front of the design review board, and you would also have to go in front of the board of adjustment. And I'm sorry, you said something with murals and something else. What was the other one?
the maximum setbacks.
So yes, we work
On
on
the R1Bs and R1Cs, and these are some substantial lots. These aren't all the same small lots that you're saying. These are big lots. You know, and nobody in the comments, nobody in the community said, please put setback on my big lot. Please. We like front yards. We don't want our lots cut off. Why is that even put in the first place? In all respect to all you guys, I do not understand how that got into it.
So we did actually have a community member who requested that to be placed within the zoning ordinance and zoning regulations, and the planning commission debated or not.
Community member? One out of the thousands that have R1Bs and R1Cs, that counts.
So it is a request from a community member, and the planning commission debated the issues as to whether or not it was appropriate. And again, you know, we've talked a lot about continuing the character of Fort Thomas, and that's the character whether it's along the avenue or whether it's along the side streets. And part of the character of the street is how the homes are positioned on that street. So again, that was a policy decision that was brought before the planning commission, and the planning commission decided to include that.
Who was the community member?
Who was it? Who was it? Well, you know, I don't care who it is. Can you just tell me the meeting and I'll go back to the tab? Can you tell me the meeting and I'll just go back and look at it? I don't want to waste anybody's time.
I don't remember the specific meeting. It came up sometime during phase 2, and we talked about it. We talked about it at subsequent meetings after that. But in terms of the specific meeting, I don't remember.
I mean, and this is the transparency we're asking about. We select through these meetings. Did this happen behind the scenes?
No, ma'am. It was a discussion that happened in front of the planning commission, and I can tell you, the first discussions happened in this room, and subsequent discussions happened at the city building. As I said, I think that, or were there any other questions about the UDO?
I guess the question is how do we keep our character, because one of the great things about Fort Thomas is the fact that everything is a little bit different.
Yeah.
You know, you're not looking at a cookie cutter community. And so I think that's, if I speak, I hate to speak on your behalf, but I feel like that's what she's saying, is that we don't want everything to be perfectly lined up.
Yeah.
You know,
Looks like a.
that's not who we are today. Why do we want to be that way in the future?
I mean,
Well, they'll have the opportunity to go before the board of adjustment for a dimensional variance, you know, and state their case, and that's what the board of adjustment's there for.
why do we put it on there? How is it better? That's what we're asking. I mean, you
That's what we decided.
Well, and I think, and I don't remember specifically which meeting it was that was discussed. I think the intent was essentially to try to make sure that most of the new properties that are developed in the city are generally aligned with their neighboring properties, with the houses next door. And so you don't have a house in somebody's backyard, essentially.
well, that's understandable. That's why you get the back, the setbacks from the back.
Well,
Yeah, intrude on the back.
Usually it's much more effective to do it as a maximum from the front than it is to a minimum from the back, and your lots longer, 200 feet. So that was the intent.
But these are well-established neighborhoods I'm talking about. I mean, our neighborhood's been there for many, many years.
Right.
We would appreciate it, just, and I'm talking to you guys, to just take it off. I don't see any need for a maximum setback, and somebody that wants to take it off.
There you go, a community member requested it.
Thank you, just one.
Well, I mean, and that was we've had a lot of feedback that people want to preserve the character of the city. One of the ways to do that is to try to make sure that the offset from the front lot
The
line is
historic district.
consistent.
The historic district, we want to preserve the character of the historic district. Our side streets and the residential, no. Preserve what we already have in place, tweak what needs to be fixed, but don't put any regulations on
that you don't have the proper feedback from the community. That's all we're asking. And I don't think that's asking much from a lifelong person who lives in Fort Thomas, who's been attending all these meetings, and I feel like you're not being heard, but you're messing with people's yards. You can't even regulate the historic districts right. You don't have the guidelines in place, but you want to put them on ours and expecting it's going to be done right? I mean, do you understand how we feel? I mean, 'cause this is our properties you guys are talking about. That's why I sit here. Okay, you understand that? This is my property. This is their properties. We want to be able to say what's going on with our property. So
Right.
please respect that.
Right, and we do, and we're trying to balance that, the rights of the property, to do what they want with the property, with the overall community, so.
And I respect you guys, so please respect us, because that's why I show up. That's why I pay the recruits, because we deserve to know about this. Thank you.
If you're really trying to balance it, I have heard no one here ask for more restrictions.
On our residential property.
Nobody's asked for that.
Yeah. Do a survey, yes, we feel like that.
What are you fearful of if the community contributes to the discussion?
No, we're not fearful, no, I mean, we invite their comments.
We have not been included in many things. I've heard you guys say there were meetings, there were coffee clutches. I'm a resident in town. I was never even notified. I found out about it sitting at meetings that it had happened. But you can find all the money in the world to put signs out for the farmer's market. You don't put any signs out about the zoning meetings or the coffee clutch. You could use the Moyer sign and notify people if you really wanted input.
Well, this is only the planning commission, that goes back to the city as its issue.
All right, does anybody else have any other questions or comments, and if not, we're going to close the public hearing. Okay, that being said, do I have a first, or I could have a motion to close the public hearing? I have a motion and a second. Tim.
Larry first.
Yeah. All in favor, say aye. Aye. So ordered. So the next step in this process, we will have a discussion of the comments and questions that were raised this evening at our next regularly scheduled planning commission meeting on October 16th. I believe that will be at the city building. We'll be meeting on October 16th at the city building at 6:30 if you want to come and provide any further comments or questions or listen to the deliberation of the planning commission. And then subsequent to that, we will make a recommendation on something from the Unified Development Ordinance to city council for their review.